Hello, folks. My name's James. I'm CEO of Mobilize. We are the tech startup by carers and for carers, and it's really fantastic to have you with us this evening for a conversation about how we can build back better for carers. So Mobilize, as I say, is the tech startup for carers. We're working with local authorities and CCGs, people all over the country, to boost capacity for supporting carers, particularly during COVID. So if you're thinking about how we can be supporting carers just at the moment, while we're going through a tough time, please do be in touch with us. Now, you're joining us for part of our Build Back Better series, where we're asking the question, how can we together be building back better for carers after the real challenges of the COVID-19 crisis? And I think we're all aware of just how difficult it's been for the UK's 13.5 million unpaid carers. So there's lots of challenges that we've been going through, but there's also a real opportunity to think ahead and to think of something new and different, and how the world could be better for carers in the future. So thank you to everybody who's joining us this evening. Hello, Lillian, welcome. Do please join in the comments. Now, this is a first for us. So we've I had a play around earlier, and hopefully if you're watching on YouTube, then and if it's helpful to have captions and subtitles, there should be a button down here somewhere that will enable you to do that. Do let us know in the comments if you've managed to make that work, because we'd be very pleased about that. Now, this evening, we're joined by Matthew Mckenzie. I'm really pleased that Matthew is able to join us for this conversation, because Matthew brings experience not only as a carer himself, but also someone who's doing an extraordinary amount of work to support other carers in his area and in fact across London and many people around the country. So we're really pleased to have him. And he's also done some writing on the subject of caring as well. So we're pleased to have him. Let me just bring him in now. Hello, Matthew. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm all right. Been busy, as you've mentioned. I do a lot of things. Busy caring. Busy trying to work out what sort of things I can bring to today's discussion. And I'm glad that I've been given the opportunity to air my views, because I've always wanted to take the chance to raise that awareness of what carers have been going through. I mean, I've been caring for a long time, and I look forward to talking more about that.
Thank you. Well, we're really pleased that you're able to join us for all of the reasons I mentioned above. But personally, one of the reasons I'm really excited is that I hear every time you're talking, I hear a real passion for making things better for carers. And so often this conversation about supporting carers can be really kind of focus on the huge challenges and the real problems that carers are facing. But I think there's a real opportunity to think positively about, well, how can we make a difference? How can we improve things? So that's hopefully what we're going to be able to do today. Now, as I say, welcome everybody who's joining us this evening. Really great to have you with us. Hello, Carol. Great to have you with us. Please do put a comment in if you've got any questions for Matthew or any thoughts about how we can be building back better. Please do share them in the comments, and we can bring them into the conversation as we go along. Matthew, I'm going to bring you a little bit closer so we can have that conversation. And I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about how you became interested in carer support and what your personal journey is that's brought you to this point as well.
Yeah, and thank you for that question. It starts common in a situation that I've been exposed to the caring experience. Which is a shame. Obviously, some people do become interested in care without having to go through that difficult process. Caring should be one of the pinnacles, I suppose, of love and care and attention. But when you're sort of thrown into it and gone through that route, you start to feel, well, hang on, I certainly want to continue raising that awareness. And for me, it started many years ago, close to 18 years. And my mother was first diagnosed with mental ill health, that being schizophrenia. And she was a carer herself, oddly enough. She was caring for both my brothers who have autism, who I still try and support every now and again, if possible. But yeah, it was most of the time. I got to say it was difficult. I could have never understood in my life what mental illness was until you see it firsthand and how it can affect the relationship with the person that you've always known to be such a strong person who's raised you. And I stood there thick and thin in regards to how my mother really suffered through mental illness. So I had my sister was trying to help, and my dad, but in the end, I had to just stick in there and support my mum and my brothers as much as I could. Unfortunately, early last year, my mum passed away. But I'll talk a bit more about that in regards to the book I wrote. I received a lot of support from the mental health services. I can't slate them. They're under pressure themselves. There's no doubt about that, and they're still under pressure, even more so than ever. The resources for mental health services and social services, are finite and dwindling and scary because of the amount of pressures that are on those services. But unfortunately, carers also, and I'd say unpaid carers, not just carers, but take the brunt of that, because without those resources, carers have to do a lot more than they should be doing. And going back several years, I can see there was such a major change. Even though I'm still caring now, I can see carers having to do a lot more than what they would have done many years ago.
There's something about the buck stops here, right? So and I completely agree. I think there are some absolutely fantastic people doing amazing work to support carers. So this is not a criticism at all. But as different services come under challenges, and different things have to be let go, ultimately it's going to be the carer, the unpaid carer, who picks that up at the end, and who has to take that, because of course there's nowhere else to go, is there? I think you're absolutely right there. And Matthew, you've as a result of your own caring role, you've now taken on a role supporting other carers as well in a number of different groups. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about and the work that you're doing with those groups now?
Yeah, with pleasure. And that's one thing I often want to raise awareness of, in the sense that carers can become an example to other carers out there, and we need more of it. We need more carers, stepping up and networking with those who can tend to be isolated. Caring for someone can be almost an isolating experience. But for me, when I was a carer governor for my local trust, South London and Morsley, I didn't serve another term. I did 3 years, and I thought, I did enjoy it. It was quite good engagement with the community, but I was a carer governor. My focus is on carers, and I wanted to engage with them more. So I got support from my local care centre, Carers Lewisham, which was the first one to set up what you call a mental health carer forum. Not really a support group, but a way for carers to engage and mental health service to engage with carers who came for someone with mental illness, to say like what's happening with those services, and a way to get those services to be more carer focused as well. So that started almost 7 years ago with the support of Carers Lewisham, and then I got a lot of support from Lambeth Carers Hub for the next set over in Lambeth. Great support. They had a good support group. Carers were welcoming. They knew I was from Lewisham, but they wanted to see how the care forum went over there. And Carers Lambeth Hub got it really. They said, yeah, carers should lead in such forums. It should be an empowerment role. And then the next was Carers Southwark. Again, provided a lot of facilities, excellent facilities they provided. It's a shame we can't use that now because of the corona situation.
Yeah,
but
so frustrating.
Staff was so friendly. And then the last one was the BAME carers, which was actually a mix really. It was not just carers, but service users and patients were also were welcome into the group.
Yeah.
Because so go ahead.
And Matthew, one of the things I wanted to ask you was that there's a real focus in a lot of your work about mental health carers.
That's right.
And I wonder whether you can describe the difference in need and what are the differences between mental health carers and unpaid carers more generally. Is there a difference to the kind of support needed? What are the implications for that? Because I think that's something that's really come out strongly in the work that you're doing.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of differences. I could, written a book on it, but it didn't much touch on the subject, and I don't think the second one will either. But there's always more room into that, and more research. We need a lot more research into it. But the first thing that comes to mind is the stigma.
Yeah.
And it's a sad thing to say. No one wants to be the first to sort of say, I'm caring for someone who has mental illness, because a lot of people in the community might not understand it, and they might sort of think, oh, that person's going to be violent. But they're more, suffering mental illness are more of a risk to themselves, to be honest. Not to say that there aren't situations out there when that person not getting any support, then the risk doesn't come on the family or the services or anyone else. That can happen. I won't deny that. But there is a mental health stigma. Another thing is the use of psychiatry. When you're engaging with carers, when you're caring for someone with mental health needs, the engagement and involvement must be at a deep level, because there's a lot of mysterious, I would say, trying to work out how someone's well-being is, and you would need to talk more. Not to say that isn't apparent when you're caring for someone, caring for someone who's older aged. But with mental illness, the carer is trying to work out how on earth I'm going to work out what to do when someone's self-harming or eating disorder.
There's a really interesting piece there, Matthew. So I've spoken to a lot of people who've said how the carer, the unpaid carer, becomes an expert in the condition of the particular person that they're caring for, and particularly that means, well, if somebody's trying to prescribe a specific bit of medicine, they can say, no, we tried that, and that had this side effect or whatever it might be. And I can absolutely understand how, in the case of mental health, when a carer can observe behaviors, peaks and troughs in mood and things like that, and then relate them back to the clinicians, actually that's a really important part of the support that they're providing.
Absolutely, and preaching to the converted here, really. And this is the reason, especially if you've been caring for a while, that those families and carers need to be taken seriously. And still at time, there might not be so, which is why I work on the initiative to be more involved in called the Triangle of Care, which was set for mental health trusts, especially inpatient wards, I suppose, which was developed in conjunction with Carers Trust. I've forgotten his name, Alan Worthington.
Yeah.
And they've been really involved in getting me involved in other carers as well to push that forward. It still needs a lot of awareness, a lot of focus. I know the Royal College of Nursing is taking that on, but there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done to involve families and carers and get that communication between patient and mental health professional as well.
Yeah, well, let's come on to that in just a moment, because I think there's a really important conversation to be had about how we make sure services are honouring and really recognising the role of carers in supporting people. I want to say hello to Carol down in Worcester, very close to where home is for me. So hello, Carol, welcome. Faith and Tash, great to have you with us, and Suzanne as well. Hello. Please do keep your comments coming in, and any questions that you have for Matthew about how we can be building back for carers. Matthew, you've been continuing the support that you offer to carers throughout the pandemic. So even though you weren't able to meet in person anymore, as you just mentioned, you've been running them through online groups. And I've got a couple of questions in there. I want to ask how it works, because I know that running online groups, support groups for carers, has been a real challenge for a lot of people. But before we get to that, I want to ask, are there any key themes that you're seeing that carers are experiencing right now? What are the things top of mind for carers that you're talking to in, where are we, the beginning of February 2021?
There's several, but the first one has to be isolation. When you're thinking in psychiatry, again, the key theme is being there, listening, looking for facial expressions, anything with psychology. is pinnacle with these types of groups, especially in mental health. So just observing, who's there, the togetherness, somewhere to go. Obviously, there are advantages as well that I don't have to travel left, right, and centre, because those groups that I'm doing, I'm covering south, east, south, southwest London, and sometimes stuff over in West London. And the mental health trusts and services, especially West London, NHS Trust, has been really supportive. They've been really welcoming. I love the community over there, and over in Greenwich, really welcoming. I know I'm not from there, but they need the peer support group. That's one thing that I've noticed carers are looking out for. Especially if you're a new carer and you're caring for someone that with this crisis, mental illness has been brought on for the first time. Someone's lost their job and they break, and you're caring for someone with mental health symptoms, but it's hard to find the resource and the support, especially if you're not referred to anything.
Matthew, you're preaching to the converted here as well, because it's something that we've seen in the mobilised community as well. That there's something really powerful about peer support when you can come up alongside someone and say, "Hey, I get it. I've been there, and this is what I've found helpful." Not saying this is what you have to do or this is the way to do it, but just to be kind of that listening ear and that important empathy, which is so important. And Matthew, can you say a little bit more about how those peer support groups are working? Because are people referred to them? What are the mechanics of it? How often do they happen?
Well, I run two in conjunction with the forums. Obviously, the forums are for engagement and empowerment purposes. Peer support groups are a bit more tougher because obviously the idea of peers that the person leading that has been through it, so they can recognize straight away the situations mental health carers or unpaid carers face. So you have to set an example to other carers in the hope that they become peers themselves, and that expands. A lot of support is coming from the carer centres, Greenwich Carer Centre, Lambeth Carers Hub, Lewisham Carer Centre, and especially give a shout out to Sutton and Merton Carer Centre. They help advertise the group in conjunction with trusts, if possible. I use Eventbrite, so they run once a month. The referral is difficult. I've got an issue with GPs. I don't want to be bad to them, but they've got this thing called social prescribing, but it's a bit of a mystery to me because I don't know how they're referring, because I don't see that many new carers. And
well, Matthew, I make a commitment here and now that we will get someone on to talk about social prescribing, because it's something that comes up a lot, and I think a lot of people would love to understand how that works.
Yeah, I mean, it's needed, no doubt about that, but that's not the only thing. When I hear people saying, yeah, social prescribing is all right, but they're saying, well, where's the services? You can't keep referring people into a circle. They've got to stop somewhere. We want the resources and the money into getting more of the groups, not just people referring and referring on. That's not going to be any good, is it?
Absolutely. Now, we've had a couple of questions in, and I want to share one with you. So Ritson Shields asks, in what ways can mental health carers' views be included in the care of our loved ones by psychiatrists? And I wonder, Matthew, have you seen any really great practice, any organisations that are really getting this right at the moment?
It's difficult. I mean, don't get me wrong, the organisation's certainly getting it right, but they've got a lot of road to cover, and it helps, unfortunately, that families and carers need to be vocal. And also the social workers and the community nurses out there. And we need those care support officers out there. Trusts need to employ them. There's quite a few trusts, I'm not naming names, but they just don't have the care support officers out in the community, because they're the ones that are going to make sure those psychiatrists, make sure those doctors, make sure those nurses are care aware. So some trusts have lost their care leads, and this is now hit at the at mental health staff, who unfortunately become less care aware. A good way that they can be involved is via the care plan, the service users care plan.
I think that's a really key lesson, actually. Well, a key lesson for all of us. So First up, that actually investing in carers can be a really important way and really valuable way of making sure that carers are brought into that route, and that improves clinical outcomes. And let's be honest, budgets are really stretched at the moment, and actually investing in carers can have a really positive impact on the costs associated further down the line. Because when people get better or are better supported, that's a better outcome for everybody. And the other piece that you mentioned there, Matthew, is about the care plan and making sure that carers are referred to in there properly is a really good piece. Now, we've also had another question in from Faith, who's asking, have you any groups that it could include young carers? And there are some particular challenges around supporting young carers, but there's a really specific need to support young carers. So, Matthew, have you any thoughts on that?
Yeah, always. The thing is, it's a tough one, because obviously you need young carers to attend and be referred there, and even if you're going to run something like that, you've got to be on the level that they are. You've got to relate somehow, and I would prefer that a young carer sort of step up and try and be that peer support for it. But the other side of the coin is you can also run a young carers sort of activist sort of forum and query with services. What is the support for young carers? Because I can certainly bet you that not many mental health trusts has that young carer focus at the moment.
Yeah,
they're being forgotten. And the other side to it is that unfortunately young carers have to cope. They just cope because they don't have that life skill to sort of be vocal to the trusts and all services and say, look, where's the support? Where's the identification of us?
Yeah, a very interesting trend I've seen. So my background is in education originally, and I've seen a lot of schools identify a young carers lead in school, and that seems to be a really powerful way of identifying and then making sure that that young carer is linked into the relevant services as they go. Now, we were talking about social prescribing a moment. I just want to cover off two comments that have come in on social prescribing, and then we must get on to the campaign to build back better. So Brenda, thanks for your comment. You mentioned that there's a really long wait for social prescribing placements, and carers in that time are acting as personal assistants to enable the service user to access the service. So there's a real challenge there, and it looks like post-COVID, although the key strain on COVID cases on the NHS right now is starting to decrease, we know that will be followed up by a large number of various other cases that haven't been addressed in the last couple of months. So that's probably likely to carry on as we go along, which is where we can bring Carol in. So Carol's got some great examples of social prescribing working in Worcestershire, and if you look out for Carol on the socials, she's very happy to talk to anyone about the work they're doing there. Now, Matthew, I really want to give you the chance to say a bit about how we can build back better for carers, because this, as I said at the top of the conversation, there's a real opportunity here as we move out of COVID and we start to think to the future. Carers have had a really difficult time recently. In 5 years' time, what are the things that you would like to see that would tell you that we've been able to build back better for carers?
Have the opportunity for carers to have their say at a very high level. Even if it's in the news. I did see a piece where yourself was in the news, and carers need to be on that national focus. And to be honest, councils, the services, those that make the decisions can't go away and make the decisions on care strategies and care assessments, in a silo. They must involve. I'm talking about co-production and involvement. They must involve those carers. And unfortunately, it is funding as well. It's not I do agree it's not the be all and end all, but the resources need to be put back into it. There's been so many cuts. There's been long austerity drive, followed on by this terrible pandemic, and the resources are dwindling. We need the care support officers, on the floor, engaging and identifying those carers. But carers need to have their say. There's got to be resources for them. I know Carers Trust is trying to do a big drive for this as well.
Absolutely. I think having having the carer voice properly kind of communicated and captured is really important. And if I can kind of build on your comment there, Matthew, I think there's something about making sure that all carers' voices are represented as well. So much of what we do in carer support needs to be accessible and inclusive, and make sure that it's the full breadth of the caring experience which is represented in the voice that we can champion. And there are some great examples of where carers' input has really changed things and made a big difference to the sector as well. And Matthew, are you hopeful that some of that can be done? I mean, have you seen any examples of really creative use of funding, a creative use of carer voice that you would want to see replicated around the country?
Yeah, I mean, I can't fully remember the campaigns. I know Carers UK almost trip over themselves to continue to engage. At almost government level, they've come to my care forums, so they've worked really hard to engage with carers and BAME carers about what sort of campaigns they're working on. The main thing, I suppose, is to get carers' confidence built up for them to be vocal and engage with the decision makers. Because the problem I do see is that you have really clever people in charge of all these policies, and they can run rings around carers using all sorts of jargon and clever tricks, and carers are none the wiser. So the carers need to be educated and empowered to help make those decisions and not be sort of outsmarted, because this has been going on ever since the Care Act 2014. This has still been a problem.
Yeah, there was an interesting point. Now I've putting myself under a lot of pressure here to remember exactly who it was who did the document, but I saw a review recently of progress since the Care Act, produced by researchers at the LSE, at the Centre for Policy and Evaluation in Care, I think it's called. And there was a really striking summary that said the Care Act, a great piece of legislation, amazing principles enshrined in law, and the implementation has actually seen a decrease in carers' assessments happening, and a lot of the metrics that we use to measure its success have gone downwards. So there's clearly a big challenge, and we just got a comment in here that lines up with something that you said, one of your highlights, Matthew, that budgets are a real issue in Building Back Better, and that financing support services is going to be key. And I suppose the question is, how can we find solutions that maximize bang for buck? So for those pounds that we are investing, how can we make sure that support is really effective and impactful? Matthew, you mentioned a moment ago BME carers, and I know that's something that you're passionate about, that's close to your heart. Can you say a little bit about the challenges that you've identified and what Building Back Better for BME carers particularly would look like?
Education, campaigning, reducing stigma, and the support of those who run those services, health and social care, to engage with the BME community, be it carer or the service user. There's a lot of stigma and racism out there. There's no doubt about it. One thing I'm proud. Usually, I'm critical of the trust slam every so often. I might not seen it, but one thing I do admire is that when I see an email from them or everything like that, I see Black Lives Matter in that email. Mm-hmm. So it makes me proud to see it. They're not ashamed to take on challenges, and I want other mental health trusts to do the same. To say, look, we stand in solidarity with the Black community, and not to say that I'm letting the trust off the hook. They've unfortunately had situations and cases where Black service users have suffered due to serious incidences. Quickly going back to what was mentioned before, I know I shouldn't jump back to that. I don't want to let commissioners off the hook. And I know we had, the CCGs. I know I think they've been chopping and changing, they've been merging, and they might be getting rid of them. But the thing is, if you're going to hold, with the budget situation to account, you do need CCGs to be upfront with what's being spent upon, because that's one way you can target them and say, well, you put that money in this area. Why is it not gone here? And that's been really hard to pin down. So commissioners shouldn't be sort of a mysterious sort of, what they're doing with the money. They need to tell us. it's a boring topic, but that's where a lot of power is, the money.
Well, it makes such difference, and you always say if you want to know what an organisation cares about, you look at the budget, you look at the finance sheet, and that will tell you.
Spend a lot of money on these fancy meetings, and it's not coming to the I should take from an angry cat anyway. But going back to the BAME situation, a lot of we have to work together with the services. It's not always the mental health services' fault, even though they, it is their responsibility in some sense with the services. I think there's got to be a lot of education amongst the Black community, Black carers, to say this is how we experience things, and never be tired of telling that story. People say, "Oh, you must be tired," but I say to them, "No, tell them. Don't be critical. Don't be angry. Nothing like that. Be diplomatic. That's a very important thing. Be diplomatic, but tell your story. This is how things are in a way that it's affecting your caring."
Well, I think that point about education and communication and openness and transparency is really important. So Brenda's just making a comment here. Thank you, Brenda, that we need to make care pathways really clear so that we can be absolutely clear about what we expect, what are the rights, and both for the carer and for the person being cared for as well. That communication is a real challenge, and I know lots of people around the country will be banging their fists against the table if I say that the real challenge there, of course, is identification. Because if you once you recognize that you're a carer, you can then attach the rights that come with that, and that's a real step. But sorry, I'm getting carried away, Matthew. Is there anything that you want to say about Brenda's point there for making care pathways clearer and making the education aspect work?
Yeah, I bet in some trusts there isn't a pathway, at all. I won't name names, but she's absolutely right, and I'm really proud that some carers here are making some great comments and statements. I hope at some point you can interview them to get their views. They've got some excellent points. Brenda Ritson, many others here. I can't see who's there, but I'm really glad that they've come along because they've really added so much to this conversation. And I really hope that they share the video to educate others out there. But it's so important that if there are pathways, please involve the carers. Don't just, you got trusts out there that are making care pathways with service users, and that can't be right. It can't.
There's something. There's a challenge which Matthew Lariviere at Sheffield University shares occasionally, which is that patient-centered care sounds like a great idea, but the challenge is that you then actually, there's a danger that you don't include the role of the carer in that, and that's going to be absolutely central to getting things right. Matthew, we've taken up some of your evening as well, so I want to draw to a close in a moment. But first, I wonder whether you could say a little bit about the book that you've published, A Caring Mind, and the book that is on its way, which I know that a lot of the people who are joining us this evening have contributed to in different ways. Can you say a bit about your plans for that?
Yeah, I mean, the book I got here, which is when my mum passed away, Caring Mind. You can get that on Amazon. I had to leave a lasting legacy. I couldn't even sort of bury my mum because of the current situation, not hardly any funeral or anything. I had to find a way to tell her story and my story as well. It's her book as well as mine. And I know she was around today say, well, you're doing it again, saying I'm mental illness. But it's part of my story as well. So mainly in the first chapter, and I took a lot of inspiration from Carers Trust, God bless them. Tell your story and why it's important for carers to do so. Never get bored of telling your story. The rest of the chapters is just trying to get carers inspired to become involved in health and social care and network amongst each other. It's all about networking. The worst thing for a carer in activism is that they're not coming together, working together, knowing who's doing this in this area, who's vocal in that area. You've got to network. And that leads on to the second book, where again, the first book was about more my experiences, what I had to say, but the second book was, well, you as carers involved in your different mental health trusts around the country, what have you got to say? Are you going to stand up and be counted? Are the services working well for you? Are you identified well? Are you involved in the services? Do they celebrate you as a carer? So I'm getting a lot of support. I'm going to name great support from CNWL. Were one of the first. They jumped on this book. Staff, right. That is Central Office London, West London, quite a few, showing borders, excellent trusts out there, being really supportive and contributing. There have been bad trusts as well, saying, "Oh, we need to check with ComServe before we add anything on carers." And I'm thinking, come on, you're a carer lead.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that we can, when it comes out, we can share a link. Well, we can share a link to the first book this evening, and if you head to A Caring Mind on Twitter, you can follow some of the materials related to that. Matthew, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with us, and not only this evening, but for all the work that you're doing as in your many different roles. It's really impressive, and I know that we can see from the comments that have been coming in this evening just the sort of impact that it has, not just in London, but across the country as well. So, Matthew, thank you so much for your time. Have a good evening, and we'll look forward to staying in touch. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, what a fantastic personal story, but a really impressive range of things to be taken forwards as we look to build back better for carers as well. Now, it's been wonderful to have everybody with us this evening for this live webcast, and thanks to everybody who is also following on replay on YouTube as we go along. Thanks for your questions and comments, really helpful. If you want to follow us on Twitter, we are Mobilise Care. And please join us because we're coming back again every Thursday at 6 p.m. to have a conversation about how we can build back better for carers. So thanks again to Matthew, and thanks again for joining us, and have a good evening.